The stars had been quiet for 3,000 years. Admiral Kexthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the endless void through the crystal walls of his bioship. The vessel pulsed gently around him, its living walls breathing with a rhythm older than most civilizations. He was proud of what his people had built across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire stretched across 17 worlds, each one a perfect jewel in their crown of conquest. Their ships moved like graceful fish through space, powered by technology that merged flesh and metal into something beautiful and deadly. No other species had ever challenged them. No other species had ever been able to challenge them. Kexthar touched the control surface with his long, crystalline fingers. The ship responded immediately, showing him reports from across the Empire. Trade was flowing smoothly between the core worlds. The mining colonies were producing rare metals on schedule. Everything was as it should be in their perfect galaxy. Soft chime drew his attention to a new report. Scout ships had found another primitive world in the outer rim. The planet was blue and green, orbiting a yellow star. Early scans showed industrial activity, but nothing impressive. Just another young species playing with fire and crude metals. Sub-Commander Velnara, Kexthar called to his second-in-command. Take a small fleet to investigate this new world. Standard protocols. Velnara bowed her elegant head. Shall we prepare for integration or elimination? Integration, if they show promise. These young species sometimes make useful servants. Kexthar dismissed the matter with a wave. He had seen hundreds of primitive worlds. They were all the same in the end. Far across the galaxy, Captain Jake Murphy was having a very different kind of day. He stood on the bridge of the USS Dakota, a massive ship built in the orbital yards above Mars. The vessel was angular and brutal, covered in thick armor plating and bristling with weapons. It looked like what it was, a machine built for war. "Captain, we're getting strange readings from the outer sensors," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. "Something big is moving near the edge of the system." Jake moved to look at the displays. The readings were faint but definitely there. Objects moving faster than anything natural, following paths that suggested intelligence behind them. After 15 years of preparation, it looked like first contact was finally happening. "Get me Admiral Rivers on the command channel," Jake ordered, "and start warming up the weapon systems just in case." The Earth Defense Force had been ready for this moment since humanity first developed faster-than-light travel. The governments of Earth had learned from their own bloody history. When humans finally met aliens, they would not be caught defenseless. Admiral Kate Rivers received Jake's report aboard the USS Montana, the newest and most powerful ship in the human fleet. The massive Dreadnought was 2 kilometers long, armed with railguns that could punch through a mountain and particle beams hot enough to melt steel. Around her, 300 other ships of various sizes prepared for humanity's first meeting with another intelligent species. "All ships, this is Admiral Rivers," she broadcast to the fleet. "We've waited 15 years for this moment. Remember your training. Hope for peace, but be ready for anything." Commander Lisa Santos checked her systems aboard the USS Liberty, another of Earth's new super dreadnoughts. Her crew was nervous, but ready. They had all grown up hearing stories about humanity's wars, about how their species had nearly destroyed itself before finally learning to work together. Now they would find out if that hard-won wisdom would serve them among the stars. The human fleet moved into formation as the alien contacts grew stronger on their sensors. Earth's factories had been working without rest for years, building ships and weapons based on lessons learned from centuries of human conflict. Every vessel carried the hopes and fears of 8 billion people who had never seen an alien face. Meanwhile, Sub-Commander Velnara's scout fleet approached the strange system with casual confidence. Her bioships were works of art, grown rather, then built, shaped by genetic engineering perfected over millennia. The 5 vessels moved in perfect harmony, their crystal hulls catching the light of the local star. "Initial scans complete," reported her sensor officer. "The third planet shows signs of industrial civilization. Crude metal constructions in orbit, primitive chemical rockets. They appear to be at the early stages of space travel." Velnara nodded. It was exactly what she had expected. Another young species taking its first stumbling steps beyond its home world. They would be frightened when they saw the Zephyrian ships, but that was normal. Fear was often the beginning of wisdom. Prepare the standard integration protocols, she ordered. Begin with a demonstration of our superiority, then offer them the chance to join the Empire as a client species. Her communications officer activated the translation systems and began preparing the message that had been used successfully on dozens of other worlds. The pattern was always the same. Show overwhelming force, demand submission, then guide the new species into their proper place in the galactic order. Neither fleet fully understood what they were about to encounter. The Zephyrians had never met a species that could match their technology or resist their expansion. They had ruled the galaxy for so long that the idea of serious opposition seemed impossible. The humans had no idea they were about to face an empire that had conquered star systems while Earth was still recovering from its last ice age. They only knew that alien ships were approaching their home, and they would defend it with everything they had. The stage was set for a meeting that would change the galaxy forever. Two very different civilizations, each confident in their own strength, moved toward a collision that neither could fully imagine. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as the distance between the fleets slowly closed. Sub-Commander Velnara watched the primitive metal ships grow larger on her screens. The human vessels looked crude and ugly to her eyes, all sharp angles and thick armor plating. They reminded her of the ancient war machines her people had abandoned, thousands of years ago when they learned to grow their ships instead of building them. "How many vessels are we detecting?" she asked her sensor officer. "Approximately 50 ships in the immediate area, Sub-Commander. More are arriving from deeper in the system. Their largest vessels appear to be roughly 2,000 meters in length." Velnara was mildly impressed. Most primitive species could barely manage a few hundred meters for their largest constructions. These creatures showed more promise than usual. Perhaps they would make useful additions to the Empire after all. "Open a communication channel," she ordered. Standard integration protocol. The message that transmitted across space had been crafted by Zephyrian diplomats over centuries of successful conquests. It was designed to be simple and clear, easily understood by even the most primitive minds. The translation computer would handle the language barriers. "Primitive species of the third planet," the message began. "You have been selected for integration into the Zephyrian Empire. Cease all military activities immediately and prepare to receive our representatives. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. You have one of your planetary rotations to comply." Captain Jake Murphy stared at the translation that appeared on his screen. Around him, the bridge of the USS Dakota fell silent as the crew absorbed the alien ultimatum. The first words from another intelligent species in the universe, and they were a demand for surrender. "Sir," Lieutenant Amy Foster said quietly, "are they seriously threatening to destroy our entire civilization?" Jake nodded grimly. "Looks that way. Get me Admiral Rivers immediately." Aboard the USS Montana, Admiral Kate Rivers read the alien message with growing anger. She had hoped for peaceful contact, but these creatures seemed to think humanity would simply roll over and accept slavery. They had badly misjudged the species they were dealing with. "All ships, battle stations," she broadcast to the fleet. "Weapons free. If they want to fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget." The human fleet began to spread out into combat formation. Destroyers and cruisers moved to flanking positions while the massive dreadnoughts formed the center line. Gunports opened, along the hulls of hundreds of ships, revealing the weapons that humanity had spent 15 years perfecting. Sub-Commander Velnara frowned as she watched the primitive vessels begin to maneuver. Their movements were actually quite sophisticated, showing a level of tactical thinking she had not expected. Perhaps they needed a more dramatic demonstration of Zephyrian superiority. "Target their largest vessel," she commanded. "Fire a warning. Shot across their formation. Not close enough to damage them, but close enough to show them what our weapons can do." The Zephyrian bioships began to glow as their organic weapon systems charged. Crystalline projectiles formed in the living chambers, deep within each vessel, shaped by genetic processes that had been refined over millennia. The projectiles were beautiful things, clear as diamonds and sharp as razors, designed to slice through enemy hulls with surgical precision. 5 streams of crystal death lanced across space toward the human fleet. They were aimed to pass just ahead of the largest human ship, a demonstration shot that would surely terrify the primitives into submission. Captain Steve Collins watched from the bridge of the destroyer USS Phoenix as the alien weapons fire streaked toward Admiral Rivers' flagship. The projectiles were moving fast, but not faster than human sensors could track. More importantly, they looked like a direct attack on the fleet commander. "All weapons open fire," Collins shouted. "Protect the flagship." The standing orders were clear. Any hostile action against the fleet would be met with immediate and overwhelming retaliation. Collins did not hesitate to pull the trigger on humanity's first interstellar war. The USS Phoenix opened fire with everything it had. Railgun rounds accelerated to tremendous speeds, particle beams hot enough to boil metal, and nuclear-tipped torpedoes that could crack asteroids. Other human ships followed suit, filling space with a storm of deadly energy and metal. Velnara had exactly 3 seconds to realize her mistake before the human weapons reached her ship. The warning shots she had fired were being interpreted as a direct attack. The primitive species was not cowering in fear. They were fighting back with a fury that defied all her expectations. The first railgun rounds punched through her bio-ship's hull like it was made of paper. The crystalline structure that had seemed so elegant and strong crumpled under the impact of simple kinetic energy, delivered at impossible speeds. Atmosphere rushed out through dozens of holes as her beautiful vessel began to die around her. "Impossible," she whispered as her ship's living systems began to shut down. "They are primitives. How can they hurt us?" The answer came in the form of a particle beam that sliced her flagship in half. The other 4 ships in her scout fleet lasted only seconds longer, before they too were reduced to glowing debris scattered across the void. Admiral Kate Rivers watched the alien vessels disintegrate with mixed feelings. The immediate threat was over, but this was clearly just the beginning. These aliens had threatened to destroy all of humanity. They would not take this defeat quietly. "Secure the area and begin salvage operations," she ordered. "Get our science teams out here to examine the wreckage. We need to learn everything we can about their technology." Captain Amy Foster coordinated the cleanup from the USS Virginia, one of the newer super dreadnoughts that had arrived as reinforcements. The alien ships were unlike anything human engineers had ever seen. They appeared to be grown rather than built, using some kind of biological technology that was completely foreign to human understanding. "Admiral," she reported, "we're detecting some kind of transmission from the wreckage. It looks like a distress signal heading back toward alien space." Rivers nodded grimly. The surviving aliens would know exactly what had happened here. Humanity had just announced its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, by destroying the ships of what was clearly a much older and more advanced civilization. "All ships return to Earth immediately," she commanded. "We need to prepare for whatever's coming next." The first battle was over, but both sides knew it was only the beginning. Somewhere in the depths of space, the Zephyrian Empire was learning that they were no longer alone in the galaxy, and they were not going to be happy about it. The emergency message reached Admiral Kexthar's flagship 3 days after the destruction of Velnara's scout fleet. He read the transmission twice before the impossible words finally sank into his mind. 5 Zephyrian bioships destroyed. Completely annihilated. By primitives using crude kinetic weapons. "This cannot be accurate," he said to his communications officer. "Run a full analysis of the transmission, check for corruption or interference." The officer worked frantically at his station for several minutes before looking up with fear in his eyes. "The message is genuine, Admiral. Our ships were destroyed by the primitive species, all hands lost." Kexthar felt something he had never experienced before in his 3 centuries of life. For the first time in Zephyrian history, their ships had been defeated in battle. Not damaged or disabled, but completely destroyed by a species they had dismissed as barely intelligent. "Send word to all fleet commanders," he ordered, his voice cold with rage. "I want every available ship assembled for immediate departure. We will show these creatures what happens when they dare to resist the Empire." The largest fleet in Zephyrian history began to gather at the edge of their space. Over 1,000 bioships of every class, from small scouts to massive battle cruisers that could destroy entire planets. The pride of the Empire demanded nothing less than the complete extermination of the species that had dared to spill Zephyrian blood. Meanwhile, Earth was preparing for war with the desperate efficiency that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. General Paul Martinez stood in the command center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching status reports flow in from across the solar system. "How many ships do we have operational?" he asked his aide. 512. "Vessels of all classes, General. The Mars shipyards are working around the clock to finish the ships still under construction, but we need at least another month." Martinez nodded grimly. The intelligence teams had been studying the wreckage of the alien scout ships, and what they had learned was both fascinating and terrifying. The aliens possessed technology that was thousands of years ahead of humanity in some areas, but they had apparently never developed the kind of heavy weapons that humans took for granted. What about the defensive platforms? Installation is proceeding on schedule. We should have the asteroid belt fully weaponized within 2 weeks. The plan was simple but desperate. Earth's entire industrial capacity had been converted to war production. Automated factories throughout the solar system were churning out weapons, ammunition, and defensive systems at a rate that would have been impossible for any previous generation of humans to imagine. Captain Amy Foster watched the construction efforts from the bridge of the USS Virginia, one of the newest super dreadnoughts to roll out of the Martian shipyards. The massive vessel was over 2 kilometers long and armed with enough firepower to level a small country. Around her, dozens of similar ships were conducting final training exercises before the alien fleet arrived. "Captain," her weapons officer reported, "we're detecting movement at the edge of sensor range. Something big is coming." Foster felt her heart skip a beat. Long-range sensors had been tracking the approaching alien fleet for days, but this was the first time they had appeared. On short-range detection, the enemy was finally here. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships to battle stations, this is it." Admiral Kate Rivers received the alert aboard the USS Montana as the human fleet moved into defensive formation around Earth's moon. The plan was to use Luna's gravity well as a tactical advantage, forcing the aliens to approach through carefully prepared kill zones where human weapons would have maximum effect. "How many ships are we looking at?" she asked her sensor officer. "Still counting, Admiral. At least 800 confirmed contacts. Possibly more. They're maintaining perfect formation at long range." Rivers felt a chill run down her spine. 800 ships against humanity's 500. The odds were bad, but not impossible. Earth's weapons had proven effective against alien technology, and human tactics were designed around fighting superior numbers. "All ships, prepare to execute Plan Delta," she broadcast to the fleet. "Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth, we're fighting for the future of our species." The alien fleet dropped out of hyperspace in a display that would have intimidated any other species in the galaxy. Over 1,000 bioships appeared simultaneously, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the light of Earth's sun. They moved, in perfect synchronization, like a vast school of predatory fish closing in on their prey. Admiral Kexthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the crude human vessels scramble into defensive positions. The primitives had managed to destroy one small scout fleet through luck and treachery, but now they faced the full might of the Zephyrian Empire. "Begin the attack," he commanded. "I want every ship destroyed and every world in this system reduced to ash. These creatures will serve as an example to any other species that might consider resistance." The bioships began to accelerate toward Earth, their organic weapon systems charging for the battle that would determine the fate of humanity. Behind them, the vast emptiness of space seemed to hold its breath as 2 civilizations prepared to fight for the right to exist. Captain Steve Collins watched the approaching armada from the bridge of the USS Phoenix, one of the destroyers assigned to the outer defense perimeter. The alien ships were beautiful in their own way, but he felt no admiration for their elegant design. They had come to destroy his home, and he would die before letting that happen. "All weapons ready, Captain," his tactical officer reported. Collins nodded, his hand resting on the firing controls. Around him, the crew of the Phoenix prepared to face impossible odds with the same courage that had carried humanity through countless wars against their own kind. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were fighting for their families, their planet, and their species. The Battle of Luna was about to begin. The Battle of Luna began with a sight that had never been seen before in the galaxy. Over 1,000 alien bioships swept toward Earth in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls catching the sunlight like a swarm of deadly jewels. Admiral Kexathar watched from his flagship as the primitive human vessels appeared to retreat toward their home planet. "They are running," he said with satisfaction. "As expected. No species has ever stood against the full might of the Empire." His tactical officer nodded eagerly. "Shall we pursue them into the gravity well, Admiral? We can end this quickly." Kexathar smiled coldly. "Yes. Follow them to their world. I want to see the fear in their eyes when they realize how hopeless their situation truly is." The Zephyrian fleet accelerated toward Earth, drawn deeper into the solar system by what appeared to be a panicked human retreat. The bioships moved like living creatures through space, their organic systems responding to their pilots' thoughts with fluid grace. Aboard the USS Montana, Admiral Kate Rivers watched the alien fleet take the bait. The human withdrawal was perfectly calculated, designed to draw the enemy into the trap that Earth's engineers had spent weeks preparing. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt, automated weapon platforms waited in silence for their moment to strike. "Distance to activation point?" she asked her tactical officer. 60,000 kilometers in closing, Admiral. All platforms are armed and ready." Rivers felt her heart pounding as the enemy fleet drew closer to the invisible line that would trigger humanity's desperate gamble. The aliens had superior numbers and technology, but they had never faced an opponent who understood the true meaning of total war. "All ships prepare for Operation Sledgehammer," she broadcast to the human fleet. "Remember, we only get one chance at this." The moment came when the lead alien ships crossed into the asteroid belt. Suddenly, the space around them erupted in fire as hundreds of hidden weapon platforms activated simultaneously. Railgun rounds and particle beams lanced out from concealed positions among the asteroids, catching the Zephyrian fleet in a devastating crossfire. Admiral Kexathar watched, in shock as his beautiful ships began to die around him. The asteroids themselves were armed, turning the entire belt into one massive weapon system. Bioships that had ruled the galaxy for millennia were torn apart by simple kinetic rounds fired from hidden positions. "Impossible," he screamed. "How did they weaponize an entire asteroid field?" His communications officer was frantically trying to coordinate a response, but the human trap was too well planned. Every time the Zephyrian ships tried to maneuver away from one group of platforms, they exposed themselves to fire from another direction. Captain Steve Collins led his squadron of destroyers in a flanking attack, using the confusion created by the asteroid platforms to strike at the alien fleet's exposed rear. The USS Phoenix and her sister ships emerged from behind Luna like wolves attacking a scattered herd. "All weapons continuous fire," Collins ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup." The human destroyers opened up with everything they had, their weapons designed for the kind of close-range combat that had dominated Earth's naval battles for centuries. The aliens had never encountered such brutal, straightforward tactics, and their elegant formations began to collapse under the assault. Captain Amy Foster brought the USS Virginia into the heart of the battle, her super dreadnoughts' massive guns targeting the largest alien vessels. The ship's main battery could fire rounds the size of small buildings, and each shot tore through enemy hulls like they were made of paper. "Target their flagship," she commanded. "Let's cut the head off this snake." The Virginia's guns swiveled toward Admiral Kexathar's bioship, the massive vessel that served as the command center for the entire alien fleet. The first salvo missed, but the second found its mark, punching through the crystalline hull and into the ship's vital organs. Kexathar felt his flagship dying around him as human weapons tore through its living structure. The bioship's pain echoed in his mind through the neural link that connected all Zephyrian vessels to their crews. For the first time in his long life, he understood what it meant to be truly afraid. "All ships, retreat!" he ordered desperately. "Fall back to hyperspace." But the human trap was complete. As the surviving alien ships tried to escape, they found their path blocked by fresh human reinforcements arriving from the outer planets. The Mars shipyards had been working without rest, and Admiral Rivers had timed their arrival perfectly. Captain Jake Murphy led the reinforcement fleet aboard the USS Dakota, his battle-scarred cruiser accompanied by dozens of newly constructed warships. The fresh human vessels fell upon the retreating aliens like hungry sharks, their weapon systems still warm from the factory floors. "No survivors," Murphy broadcast to his fleet. "These things came here to destroy our world. We make sure they never get the chance to try again." The slaughter that followed would be remembered as one of the most decisive battles in galactic history. The Zephyrian Empire's greatest fleet was torn apart piece by piece, their elegant bioships reduced to glowing debris that would drift through the solar system for decades to come. Admiral Kexthar's flagship was among the last to die. As human, particle beams finally breached his ship's core. The proud alien commander had just enough time to send a final message to his homeworlds. The transmission was brief and filled with disbelief. "The primitives have won," he whispered into his communicator. "The Empire is doomed." The message would reach Zephyrian space 3 days later, carrying news that would shatter a civilization that had believed itself invincible. In the span of a few hours, humanity had destroyed the largest fleet in alien history, and proven that the galaxy had a new dominant species. As the last alien ship exploded in the cold vacuum of space, Admiral Kate Rivers allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Earth was safe, but she knew this victory was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had made enemies of every species that had served the Zephyrian Empire. The real war was just beginning. 6 months after the Battle of Luna, Captain Jake Murphy stood on the observation deck of the USS Dakota as it patrolled the former Zephyrian trade routes. The space that had once been filled with elegant alien bioships now hosted the angular forms of human vessels, their hulls scarred from battle but victorious. The Zephyrian Empire had collapsed completely after news of their fleet's destruction spread across the galaxy. Without their military might to enforce order, the 17 core worlds had descended into chaos. Some had surrendered immediately to advancing human forces, while others had simply gone silent, their populations fleeing into the outer rim territories. "Captain," Lieutenant Amy Foster reported from the communications station, "we're receiving a surrender offer from the Zephyrian colony on Kepler 442b. They're asking for protection from local rebel groups." Murphy nodded grimly. It was the same story on dozens of worlds. The alien empire had ruled through fear and superior technology, but when that technology proved useless against human weapons, their entire civilization had crumbled like a house built on sand. "Accept their surrender and dispatch a peacekeeping force," he ordered. "Make it clear that we're not here as conquerors, we're here to restore order." Admiral Lisa Santos reviewed similar reports from her flagship, the USS Liberty, now the command vessel for what had become known as the Terran Federation Fleet. The massive super dreadnought orbited a former Zephyrian world where human engineers were helping local populations rebuild their infrastructure. The collapse of the empire had revealed the true scope of Zephyrian oppression. For 3,000 years, they had enslaved dozens of species across hundreds of worlds, using their advanced technology to crush any attempt at rebellion. Now, with their masters gone, these enslaved peoples were tasting freedom for the first time in millennia. "Admiral," her aide reported, "the Kronar delegation has agreed to join the Federation. They're offering to share their mining technology in exchange for military protection." Santos smiled. The Kronar were a reptilian species that had been forced to work in Zephyrian crystal mines for over 2,000 years. Their knowledge of alien technology was proving invaluable as humanity tried to understand the vast empire they had inherited. "Excellent. What about the Vextai?" "Still undecided. They're grateful for their freedom, but they're not sure they want to accept human leadership. Can't say I blame them." The Vextai were an insectoid species with highly advanced mathematical abilities. They had been used by the Zephyrians as living computers, forced to calculate hyperspace routes and manage trade logistics. After so many centuries of slavery, it was understandable that they would be suspicious of any new authority. General Paul Martinez faced similar challenges from his headquarters on Earth, now serving as the first Galactic Defense Coordinator. The title still felt strange to him, but someone had to manage the transition from a human solar system to a galactic civilization spanning hundreds of worlds. Status report on the Colonial Establishment Program, he requested from his staff. Proceeding. Ahead of schedule, General. We have functional colonies on 47 former Zephyrian worlds, with more being established every week. The biggest challenge is finding enough qualified administrators. Martinez chuckled despite himself. Humanity had gone from a single-world species to masters of a galactic empire in less than a year. The learning curve was steep, but humans had always been good at adapting to impossible situations. The industrial capacity that had won the war was now being converted to peaceful purposes. The same shipyards that had produced Dreadnoughts were now building exploration vessels and colony ships. The factories that had manufactured weapons were producing construction equipment and agricultural machinery. Captain Amy Foster commanded one of the new exploration vessels, the USS Discovery, as it charted systems that had been off-limits during Zephyrian rule. Her mission was to make contact with species that had hidden from the Empire for centuries, offering them the chance to join the growing Federation. Captain, we're detecting artificial structures in the next system, her science officer reported. Looks like a space station of unknown design. Foster felt the familiar thrill of discovery that had driven humanity to the stars. Every system they explored revealed new wonders, new species with their own unique technologies and cultures. The galaxy was far more diverse and interesting than the Zephyrians had ever allowed anyone to know. Take us in slowly, she ordered. Full diplomatic protocols. Let's see who our new neighbors are. The space station belonged to a species called the Quillen, a race of energy beings who had been hiding in the outer rim for over 1,000 years. When Zephyrian scouts had first found their world, the Quillen had used their mastery of electromagnetic fields to make their entire solar system appear empty and lifeless. You are the humans, the Quillen ambassador said, when contact was finally established. We have heard of your victory over the crystal tyrants. Many species speak of you with hope. Foster smiled as she realized how much the galaxy had changed. Species that had lived in fear for millennia were now emerging from hiding, eager to be part of a new galactic community based on cooperation rather than domination. Back on Earth, children who had been born during the war were now taking their first steps. They would grow up in a galaxy where humanity was not alone, where the stars held friends as well as mysteries. The generation that had fought the Zephyrians had secured not just Earth's freedom, but the freedom of countless other worlds. Admiral Kate Rivers, now retired from active duty, often stood in her garden and looked up at the night sky. The stars no longer seemed cold and distant. They were filled with human ships and human colonies, with alien allies and new friends. Humanity had learned to reach beyond their own world without losing what made them human. The galaxy that had once trembled under Zephyrian rule now looked to Earth for guidance, not because humans were the strongest or most advanced species, but because they had proven something that no other civilization had managed in 3,000 years. They had shown that cooperation could triumph over oppression, that diversity was stronger than uniformity. The age of human expansion had begun, and the stars themselves seemed brighter for it. Admiral Zixthara felt the familiar vibration as her ship dropped out of hyperspace. The bridge of the massive Catharan vessel hummed with activity as her crew began their standard scanning procedures. This was routine work for the Empire's deep space reconnaissance fleet. They had done this hundreds of times before. Find a system, check for life, mark it for colonization if suitable. Move on to the next target. Admiral, we have arrived at system designation K7749, reported her navigation. Officer, 1 yellow star, multiple planets detected. Zixthara nodded and settled into her command chair. The holographic display in front of her showed a typical solar system. Nothing unusual so far. The third planet from the star glowed blue and green. On their scanners. Perfect. Another world ready for Catharan expansion. Begin standard reconnaissance sweep, she ordered. Full spectrum analysis of the third planet. Check for primitive civilizations. The scanner operator bent over his instruments. Within moments, his antenna-like ears flattened against his skull in confusion. Admiral, I'm getting strange readings. From the planet. Define strange, Sixthera said, her voice sharp with interest. The surface shows massive geometric patterns, artificial structures covering most continents. And Admiral, I'm detecting energy signatures. Lots of them. Sixthera stood up and walked to the scanner station. What she saw on the display made her blood run cold. The planet below them was not a peaceful world waiting for conquest. It was a fortress. The entire surface bristled with structures that could only be weapon emplacements. Huge metal towers reached toward space. The landmasses themselves seemed to be carved into defensive positions. Tactical officer, give me a threat assessment, she commanded. The tactical officer's clawed hands moved quickly over his controls. His face went pale as the data streamed across his screen. Admiral, I count over 50,000 active weapon systems pointed directly at our fleet. The planet appears to be completely militarized. That's impossible, Sixthera whispered. No primitive world could maintain that level of military infrastructure. Her communications officer suddenly looked up from his station. Admiral, we're being scanned. Multiple sources, very sophisticated technology. On Earth, thousands of miles below the alien fleet, General Kate Murphy stood in the central command center of Earth Defense Command. Red lights flashed across every console as the alien signatures registered on their deep space scanners. She had trained for this moment her entire life. Every human alive had trained for this moment. Contact confirmed, announced Captain Jake Collins from the Fighter Command Station. Unknown vessels at grid reference 77 Alpha. Configuration suggests military purpose. General Murphy moved to the main tactical display. The alien ships hung in space like dark threats against the stars. After 800 years of preparation, first contact had finally arrived. Activate Protocol 7, she commanded. All units to battle stations. Launch the ready squadrons. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes bent over her scanning equipment. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency as she analyzed the alien vessels. General, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the lead ship. Estimated crew complement in the thousands. Technology level appears advanced, but not beyond our countermeasures. How many ships total? Murphy asked. 17 large vessels. Admiral class by our estimates, multiple support craft. Murphy nodded grimly. The aliens had brought a fleet. That meant they were either very confident or very stupid. Communications, attempt contact protocols, all frequencies. Dr. Watson, I need you up here now. Across the command center, dozens of technicians worked at their stations. Earth's response was swift and coordinated. Warning signals flashed to every military installation on the planet. Hidden weapon systems powered up from their concealed positions. Orbital defense platforms that had waited in silence for centuries suddenly came online. Dr. Amy Watson hurried into the command center, still adjusting her uniform. As Earth's chief xenobiologist, she had spent decades preparing translation protocols for this exact situation. General, our computers are ready to attempt linguistic analysis if they try to communicate. Good. Jake, status on our interceptor response? Captain Collins looked up from his control panel. All ready squadrons launching now, General. Estimated time to intercept formation, 14 minutes. On the main display screen, thousands of small dots began moving away from Earth. Each dot represented a combat spacecraft emerging from hidden positions throughout the solar system. The aliens had expected to find a primitive world with perhaps a few hundred aircraft. Instead, they watched in growing alarm as Earth's response force continued to grow. Admiral Sixthera stared at her tactical display in disbelief. The number of enemy contacts kept climbing. How many ships are they launching? She demanded. Current count is approaching 12,000 active contacts, Admiral, her tactical officer reported, and more are still launching. 12,000? Sixthera's voice cracked slightly. That's more ships than our entire sector fleet. The communications officer looked up urgently. Admiral, they're attempting to contact us. Multiple frequency bands. Very sophisticated encryption protocols. Can we understand them? Our translation computers are working on it. Initial analysis suggests a complex language structure based around military terminology. On Earth, Dr. Watson worked frantically at her translation station. The alien signals were unlike anything in their databases, but the patterns were becoming clear. General, I'm getting basic communication established. They seem to be attempting standard diplomatic contact. Put it on speakers, Murphy ordered. The alien voice that filled the command center was strange and melodic, but the translation computers did their work. Unknown vessels. This is Admiral Zix Thera of the Catharan Empire. We come seeking peaceful contact with your civilization. General Murphy looked around the command center. Every officer waited for her response. 800 years of preparation had led to this moment. She activated the main communications array. Catharan vessel. This is General Kate Murphy, Supreme Defense Coordinator of Earth. You have entered restricted military space. State your intentions. There was a long pause before the alien response came back. Even through the translation, confusion was evident in the alien admiral's voice. We seek diplomatic contact. We did not realize this system was claimed by a military power. All human space is military space, Murphy replied simply. We are Earth Defense Command. How do you wish to proceed? In the depths of space, Admiral Zixathera turned to her staff. Every face showed the same expression of growing concern. They had come to catalog another primitive world. Instead, they had found something that defied all their understanding of how civilizations developed. Admiral, her tactical officer reported quietly. Their interceptor force has reached optimal firing position. We're completely surrounded. Zixthera looked at the tactical display again. 12,000 enemy ships in perfect formation around her 17 vessels. This was not how first contact was supposed to work. The humans seemed to treat diplomacy as just another form of warfare. Open a channel, she ordered. We need to understand what we're dealing with here. Admiral Zixathera opened the communication channel again. Her translator computers had been working for hours, but the human language patterns still confused them. Every word seemed to connect to concepts of war, defense, and military tactics. Even their greetings sounded like battle commands. Human Commander Murphy, she began carefully. We request formal diplomatic discussions. We wish to establish peaceful relations between our peoples. The response came back immediately, but it was not from General Murphy. A new voice spoke through the communication system. Catherine Admiral, this is Commander Scott Davis, Earth Defense Command Historical Division. General Murphy has directed me to provide you with necessary background information about our civilization. Zixathera looked at her communications officer with confusion. Historical Division? Why would they send a historian to speak with us? Commander Davis continued speaking. Admiral, our scans indicate you expected to find a primitive world. To understand why you are wrong, you must understand our history. We have been at war for 808 years. 800 years? Zixthera repeated in shock. That's impossible. No civilization can maintain warfare for that long without destroying itself. We have not been fighting each other, Davis explained patiently. We have been preparing to fight you. The silence on the Catharan bridge was complete. Every officer stared at the communication console. Finally, Zixathera found her voice. Preparing to fight us? But we have never met your species before. Not your species specifically, Davis replied. But we knew someone like you would come. In the year 1579 of our calendar, a human scientist named Dr. Richard Stone calculated that hostile alien contact was inevitable. His mathematics showed that within 1,000 years a spacefaring military power would find Earth and attempt conquest. Zixthera felt a chill run through her body. And you believed this prediction? We did more than believe it. We prepared for it. Every day, for 800 years, we have been getting ready for this moment. On Earth, Commander Davis stood in the archives deep beneath Defense Command headquarters. Around him, massive databanks held the complete military history, of human civilization. He had spent his entire career studying how humanity had transformed itself from a divided world into a unified war machine. "Tell me about this preparation," Admiral Zixthera requested. Davis activated a holographic display that showed Earth's transformation over the centuries. In 1587, 8 years after Dr. Stone's prediction, every nation on Earth signed the Unity Defense Pact. All human governments dissolved themselves to create a single military command structure. Every human citizen became a soldier in the Earth Defense Force. The hologram showed cities being rebuilt, coastlines being fortified, and mountains being carved into weapon positions. We realized that if hostile aliens found us, they would have technology we could not match. So we focused on what we could control: numbers, preparation, and perfect coordination. "Your entire species joined the military?" Zixthera asked. "Every human alive serves in some capacity. We have no civilians. Our artists create propaganda and psychological warfare materials. Our scientists develop weapons and defensive systems. Our farmers grow food for the military. Our children begin combat training at age 5. Captain Maria Santos, Earth's chief diplomatic officer, joined the conversation. "Admiral, I am what humans call a diplomat. But my training included 15 years of combat operations, 10 years of strategic planning, and 5 years of psychological warfare techniques. Diplomacy is just another form of warfare." Zixthera turned to her own staff. "This is unprecedented. An entire species that has militarized itself completely." Her cultural analyst, a specialist in primitive civilizations, spoke up. "Admiral, our databases show that militarized societies always collapse or turn on themselves. Internal warfare is inevitable when a species becomes too focused on military power." "That would be true if we were preparing to fight each other," Commander Davis interjected. "But we were preparing to fight aliens. External threats create unity, not division. We have had no wars between humans for 800 years because we have been preparing for a war with you." The Catharan bridge crew exchanged worried glances. Their empire had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never encountered anything like this. Most civilizations fought among themselves until the empire arrived to impose order. These humans had imposed order on themselves. "What is your population?" Zixthera asked. 15 billion humans, Captain Santos replied. 12 billion are active military personnel. The remaining 3 billion are support staff, engineers, strategists, and command personnel. All have military training. 12 billion active military? Zixthara's voice was barely a whisper. "That's larger than our entire empire's combined forces." "Yes," Santos said simply. "We noticed your 17 ships when you arrived. We have been tracking your approach for 3 days. Our defense grid has been locked onto your vessels since you entered our outer sensor range." Commander Davis brought up another hologram. "Admiral, I want you to understand what you are looking at. This is not just a militarized planet. This is a species that has evolved beyond normal civilization. We have become something new." The display showed Earth's industrial capacity. Every factory built weapons or military equipment. Every city was designed as a fortress. Every road could be converted to a military runway within hours. The planet's entire surface was one massive military installation. "We call it the siege mentality," Davis explained. "When you know the enemy is coming, but you don't know when, you prepare for everything. We have spent 8 centuries anticipating every possible alien attack scenario." "Every possible scenario?" Zixthara asked. "We have battle plans for invasion fleets of every size from 10 ships to 10,000. We have prepared for ground assault, orbital bombardment, biological warfare, and technological infiltration. We have trained for fighting in space on planets and in dimensions we have never seen." Captain Santos added, "We have also prepared for the possibility that the aliens might be friendly. But our definition of friendly might be different from yours. We believe that any species capable of interstellar travel must be militarily powerful. Therefore, any contact with aliens is essentially military contact." "Even diplomatic contact?" Zixthara asked. "Especially diplomatic contact," Diplomacy is how military powers avoid fighting when the cost would be too high. We are willing to be diplomatic, Admiral, but we want you to understand the terms. What terms? You are 17 ships facing a planet with 12 billion soldiers and 50,000 active weapon systems. You have found us exactly as Dr. Stone predicted you would. Now we must decide together whether this ends in warfare or alliance. Admiral Zixathera looked around her bridge. Her officers were pale and silent. They had come to catalog another primitive world for easy conquest. Instead, they had found a species that had spent 8 centuries preparing specifically for their arrival. Commander Davis, she said slowly, what would you have done if we had not come? We would have kept preparing, Davis replied, and eventually we would have come looking for you. Admiral Zixathera sent an emergency message to the Ketharan Empire's Central Command. The response came back within hours. Supreme Commander Velthar himself would review the situation. This had never happened before in the Empire's long history of conquest. The holographic image of Supreme Commander Velthar appeared on the bridge of Zixathera's ship. His massive form and battle-scarred face showed the experience of someone who had conquered dozens of worlds personally. Behind him stood the Empire's ruling council, their faces grim as they listened to the initial reports. Admiral Zixathera, Velthar began, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. Explain to me how 17 ships of our finest fleet are being held at bay by a single primitive world. Supreme Commander, they are not primitive. Our initial assessment was completely wrong. Zixathera activated her tactical display, showing Earth's defensive positions. This planet has a standing military force of 12 billion active personnel. Every single member of their species serves in their military. 12 billion? One of the council members interrupted. That's impossible. No species can maintain that level of militarization. They can and they have, Zixathera replied. For over 800 years. Supreme Commander, we need to understand what we're dealing with here. Velthar studied the tactical display with growing concern. The Ketharan Empire had conquered 847 worlds, but they had never seen anything like this. Have you attempted to make contact with their leadership? Yes, Supreme Commander, but every contact goes through military channels. They have no civilian government, no separate diplomatic corps. Everything is military. On Earth, Colonel Danny, Brooks walked through the corridors of the Deep Defense Archives. These underground facilities stretched for miles beneath the planet's surface, containing every piece of military intelligence humanity had gathered over 8 centuries. As Earth's military liaison for alien contact, he had been chosen to share selected information with the Ketharan Empire. Supreme Commander Velthar, Brooks said as he entered the communication chamber. I am Colonel Danny Brooks, Earth Defense Force. I understand you wish to know more about our civilization. Velthar studied the human officer through the communication link. Brooks looked ordinary enough, but something in his eyes suggested depths of military knowledge that made even the Supreme Commander uncomfortable. Colonel, we have reviewed your historical records. You claim your entire species has been preparing for our arrival for 8 centuries. Not your arrival specifically, Brooks replied. We have been preparing for the arrival of any hostile spacefaring civilization. Our analysis suggested that such contact was inevitable. And you prepared by militarizing your entire world? We did much more than that. Brooks activated a holographic display that showed Earth's transformation over the centuries. Supreme Commander, we didn't just become military. We became warfare itself. The display showed human cities, but they were unlike anything in the Ketharan databases. Every building served a military purpose. Every street could become a firing position. Every park contained hidden weapon systems. The entire planet was designed as a single massive fortress. Our children begin tactical training at age 5, Brooks continued. By age 10, they can operate basic military equipment. By age 15, they have chosen their military specialization. By age 20, they are fully trained soldiers with years of combat simulation experience. Combat simulation? Velthar asked. We have been fighting simulated wars against imaginary alien invaders for 800 years. Every human alive has participated in thousands of battle scenarios. We have fought every type of enemy we could imagine. Major Rachel Clark joined the conversation from the Strategic Planning Division. Supreme Commander, we have analyzed your ship since your arrival. Your technology is advanced, but it follows patterns we anticipated. Your tactical formations match several of our training scenarios. You have been practicing to fight us specifically? Velthar's voice carried a note of disbelief. We have been practicing to fight everyone, Clark replied. We developed battle plans for every possible alien encounter. Your technology level, ship configurations, and tactical approaches all fall within our prepared scenarios. Velthar turned to his own tactical advisors. Is this possible? Can a species actually prepare for unknown enemies? His chief military analyst, a veteran of hundreds of planetary conquests, spoke carefully. Supreme Commander, our intelligence suggests they have achieved something unprecedented. They have created a military civilization that has optimized itself for warfare without actually fighting wars. How is that possible? They fight each other constantly in training exercises. Their entire economy is built around military production. Their art, literature, and entertainment all focus on military themes. They have created a culture where everyone thinks like a soldier. Captain Tony Miller, commander of Earth's 1st Contact Regiment, entered the communication chamber. Supreme Commander, we have prepared a demonstration for you. With your permission, we would like to show you something. What kind of demonstration? We would like to show you how quickly we can mobilize our defenses. We have kept our forces at minimal readiness during our communications. If you agree, we will show you our full defensive capability. Velthar looked at his advisors. Several shook their heads, but his curiosity was stronger than his caution. Very well, proceed with your demonstration. On Earth, General Kate Murphy gave a single command to her staff. Activate full defensive readiness, all systems online. Across the planet, the transformation was instant. Weapon systems that had been powered down came online. Hidden missile silos opened their hatches. Orbital platforms that had been drifting in standby mode activated their engines and moved to combat positions. On the Ketharan ships, alarm sirens began wailing. Admiral, the tactical officer shouted, I'm reading massive energy spikes from the planet. New contacts appearing everywhere. Admiral Zixathera looked at her display in horror. The number of active weapon systems had tripled in less than 10 minutes. How many weapons are they showing us now? Over 150,000 active systems, Admiral. And more are still coming online. Captain Miller's voice came through the communication system. Supreme Commander, what you are seeing is our standard defensive readiness. This is not our maximum capability. This is simply our normal response to a potential threat. Normal response? Velthar's voice was strained. Yes. We maintain 3 levels of defensive readiness. You have just seen Level 1. Level 2 involves our mobile defense fleets. Level 3 involves our planetary bombardment systems. Planetary bombardment systems? Supreme Commander, we assumed that any alien invasion would involve orbital bombardment of our cities. So we built weapons capable of shooting back. Our planetary defense cannons can engage targets at ranges of over 1 million kilometers. Velthar looked at the tactical display showing Earth's defensive capabilities. The planet was not just militarized, it was a weapon. The entire world had been turned into a single, massive fortress designed to destroy any force that approached it. Colonel Brooks, he said slowly, what do you want from us? We want what we have always wanted, Supreme Commander. We want to survive. For 800 years we have prepared for this moment. Now that it has arrived, we must decide together what happens next. And if we decide to leave your system and never return, then we would prepare for the next visitors. But Supreme Commander, we know about your empire now. We know you exist. We know your technology level and your military capabilities. We cannot unknow these things. What are you saying? We are saying that contact has been made. The age of preparation is over. The age of action is about to begin. Supreme Commander Velthar made a decision that would change the history of both species. He decided to test the humans. If they were truly as militarily advanced as they claimed, then the Catharan Empire needed to know exactly what they were dealing with. Admiral Zixathara, he commanded through the communication link. I am sending War Master Kethnar with our finest battle fleet to your location. We will conduct training exercises with these humans. We need to understand their true capabilities, or master. Kethnar was the Empire's greatest military commander. He had never lost a battle in over 300 engagements across 50 different worlds. His fleet represented the absolute best of Catharan military technology and tactics. If anyone could properly test the humans, it would be him. On Earth, General Kevin Wright received the news of the incoming Catharan battle fleet with calm satisfaction. As Earth's tactical command chief, he had been waiting his entire life for this moment. A real test against actual alien military forces. How many ships are they sending? He asked his intelligence officer. Preliminary scans showed 230 vessels, General. Mix of heavy cruisers, destroyers, and support craft. They appear to be bringing their best equipment. Wright nodded and activated the main tactical display. Good. We'll finally get to see how our training compares to real combat. Alert all division commanders. This is what we've been preparing for. Lieutenant Colonel Beth Turner stood in the command center of Earth's Rapid Response Fleet. Around her, thousands of human ships prepared for the mock battle that would determine the future relationship between the two species. Turner had commanded fleet operations for 15 years, but this would be her greatest challenge. Colonel Turner, General Wright's voice came through the communication system. Your fleet will engage the Catharan force in the outer system. Rules of engagement are simulation mode. No live weapons, but full tactical deployment. Understood, General. How much of our capability should we reveal? Show them what we can do, Colonel. All of it. Turner smiled. For 800 years, humans had wondered how they would perform against real alien military forces. Now they would find out. All ships, this is Fleet Command. Prepare for full combat deployment. This is not a drill. War Master Kethnar's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system 3 days later. His massive flagship, the Void Hammer, bristled with weapons that had conquered dozens of worlds. Around him, his fleet formed the perfect attack formation that had never failed him. War Master, his tactical officer reported, we are detecting human fleet movements throughout the system. They appear to be responding to our arrival. How many ships? Current count is approximately 8,000 vessels, War Master. All appear to be military craft. Kethnar studied the tactical display. 8,000 ships was a significant force, but his own fleet had defeated larger numbers before. Begin the engagement simulation. Show me what these humans can do. The mock battle began with both fleets maneuvering for position. Kethnar deployed his ships in the standard Catharan attack formation that had proven successful against every enemy they had ever faced. His heavy cruisers moved to the center while his destroyers flanked the enemy positions. But something was wrong. The human ships were not responding the way enemies usually did. Instead of trying to match his formation, they were doing something completely different. War Master, his tactical officer called out. The human fleet is separating into smaller groups. They appear to be surrounding our formation. Impossible. No fleet can coordinate that many separate groups effectively, but as Kethnar watched, the human ships moved with perfect precision. 8,000 vessels operated as if they were controlled by a single mind. Every movement was coordinated. Every tactical decision was instantly communicated to every other. Ship Lieutenant Colonel Turner watched the Catharan fleet formation with professional interest. The aliens were using classic military tactics: strong center, flanking forces, standard engagement protocols. It was exactly what her training had prepared her for. All group commanders, she broadcast to her fleet. The enemy is using Formation Delta 7 from our training simulations. Execute Counter-Formation Delta 7 Alpha. Across the human fleet, 8,000 ships moved into a complex three-dimensional formation that completely surrounded the Catharan force. The maneuver was so perfectly executed that it looked like a choreographed dance. War Master Kethnar had never seen anything like it. How are they coordinating so many ships? His communications officer looked up from his instruments. Warmaster, they appear to be using some form of shared tactical consciousness. Every ship is responding to orders simultaneously. That's impossible. No species can achieve that level of coordination. But the evidence was right in front of him. The human fleet moved like a single organism. When one group of ships changed direction, every other group adjusted instantly to maintain the formation. It was military coordination beyond anything in Catharan experience. Captain Nick Rodriguez commanded the Human Special Operations Division that had been added to the fleet for this exercise. His ships were smaller and faster than the main battle fleet, designed for precision strikes and unconventional tactics. Colonel Turner, he reported, Special Ops Division is in position. We have identified 17 critical weak points in the enemy formation. Proceed with demonstration attack, Captain. Rodriguez's ships moved through the battle space like hunting predators. They avoided the main Catharan weapons and struck at support vessels and communication ships. Within minutes, they had effectively disabled the alien fleet's ability to coordinate their defense. Warmaster Kethnar watched in growing amazement as his simulated fleet was systematically dismantled. The humans were not just defeating him. They were teaching him lessons in military tactics that he had never imagined. Warmaster, his tactical officer reported, our fleet cohesion is breaking down. They have neutralized our command and control systems. How long has this engagement been running? 14 minutes, Warmaster. 14 minutes. Kethnar had never lost a battle in less than an hour. His fleet, which had conquered worlds, was being defeated by humans in 14 minutes. The simulation ended with the complete tactical defeat of the Catharan force. Not a single human ship had been lost. The alien fleet had been outmaneuvered, outfought, and outthought at every level. General Wright's voice came through the communication system. Warmaster Kethnar, we hope this exercise has been educational. We are prepared to run additional simulations if you wish to try different tactical approaches. Kethnar looked around his bridge. His experienced officers, veterans of hundreds of battles, sat in stunned silence. They had just witnessed military perfection in action. General Wright, he said slowly, we would like to understand how you achieved this level of tactical coordination. Warmaster, every human in our fleet has been training for this exact scenario for their entire lives. We have fought this battle thousands of times in simulation. We know every possible variation of your tactical approach. You have been practicing specifically to fight our formations? We have been practicing to fight every formation. Your tactics are efficient, Warmaster, but they follow predictable patterns. We have spent 8 centuries learning to recognize and counter every military pattern we could imagine. Captain Rodriguez added, Warmaster, we have also been training for unconventional warfare. Your fleet is designed to fight traditional space battles. We have been preparing for every type of combat scenario possible. Kethnar realized that he was not just looking at a militarized species. He was looking at a species that had evolved beyond normal military thinking. These humans had become something new, something that had perfected the art of warfare itself. General, right, he said. What happens now? Now we decide whether we are enemies or allies, Warmaster. But either way, both of our species have learned something important today. What is that? You have learned that humans are not the primitive species you expected to find. And we have learned that our 800 years of preparation were not wasted. The Catharan Empire Council met in emergency session for 3 days following the test battle. Supreme Commander Velthar stood before the holographic display, showing the complete tactical breakdown of their finest fleet's defeat. The numbers were undeniable. The humans had achieved a perfect victory in 14 minutes. The choice before us is simple, Velthar announced to the Council. We can attempt to conquer a species that has spent 800 years preparing specifically for our arrival, or we can forge an alliance with the most militarily advanced civilization we have ever encountered. Warmaster Kethnar, still recovering from his tactical defeat, spoke from his position at the military advisory table. Supreme Commander, I have fought in over 300 battles. I have never encountered an enemy that operates at this level of coordination. These humans do not just fight wars, they have become war itself. The council members looked at each other with concern. The Catharan Empire had built its power on military superiority. The idea that another species might be better at warfare than they were challenged everything they believed about their place in the galaxy. "What are you recommending, War Master?" asked Council Member Thexara. "I recommend alliance," Kethnar replied without hesitation. "Not because we fear them, but because we need them. The Empire has enemies throughout the galaxy. These humans could end conflicts that have lasted for decades." On Earth, Admiral Kate Murphy had been promoted to Supreme Allied Commander. The decision to form an alliance with the Catharan Empire had been unanimous among Earth's military leadership. After 800 years of preparation, humanity was finally ready to take their war machine to the stars. Dr. Sam Wilson, Murphy, said to Earth's chief strategic planner, "Give me your assessment of the galaxy beyond our system." Wilson activated the massive holographic display in the new Interstellar Command Center. The map showed Catharan space and the territories of their enemies. "Admiral, our analysis of Catharan military records shows ongoing conflicts with 17 different species. Some of these wars have been running for over 200 years. Stalemates? Exactly. Both sides are evenly matched, so the fighting continues without resolution. The Catharans have superior technology, but their enemies have advantages in numbers or defensive positions." Murphy studied the galactic map with the eye of someone who had spent her entire life preparing for interstellar warfare. These conflicts could be resolved quickly with proper tactical coordination. "That's what we believe, Admiral. The Catharans fight using traditional military doctrine. Their enemies have adapted to counter that doctrine, but none of them have ever faced human tactical thinking." General Lisa Brown entered the command center wearing the new uniform of the Earth Expeditionary Force. As the commander chosen to lead humanity's first interstellar military operation, she carried the hopes and preparations of 800 years on her shoulders. "Admiral Murphy," she reported, "the first expeditionary fleet is ready for departure. 2,000 ships, full tactical support, and our best commanders." "How many troops total?" 5 million personnel, Admiral. All volunteers, all specifically trained for alien combat scenarios." Murphy nodded with satisfaction. 5 million human soldiers, each one trained from childhood for this exact mission, would be enough to change the balance of power in any conflict. "General Brown, your mission is to demonstrate human military effectiveness in support of our new Catharan allies. Show the galaxy what 800 years of preparation can accomplish." The combined human Catharan fleet departed from Earth's solar system 3 weeks later. It was the first time in human history that their ships had traveled beyond their home system. But the crews were not nervous. They had been training for this mission their entire lives. Admiral Zixthura, now serving as the Catharan liaison to the human fleet, watched in amazement as the human ships maintained perfect formation during the hyperspace jump. Even during faster-than-light travel, the humans operated with the same precision they had shown during the test battle. "General Brown," she said through the communication link, "where are we heading for our first operation?" "The Vrex conflict," Brown replied. "Your records show that you have been fighting the Vrex Federation for 147 years. Both sides are entrenched in defensive positions around the Kalar system. We're going to end that war." The Vrex Federation had been fighting the Catharan Empire longer than most civilizations had existed. Their defensive installations around the Kalar system were considered impregnable. Generations of Vrex soldiers had been born, lived, and died in those fortified positions. When the combined fleet arrived at Kalar, the Vrex commanders initially thought it was another standard Catharan assault. They had repelled hundreds of such attacks over the decades. Their defensive protocols were automatic, but this attack was different. The human ships moved in formations that made no sense according to traditional military doctrine. Instead of attempting to break through the Vrex defensive lines, they seemed to flow around them like water. General Brown stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical display with professional satisfaction. "All group commanders execute siege-breaking formation Omega-7. The human fleet split into dozens of smaller groups, each one attacking a different point in the Vrex defensive network. But these were not random attacks. Every strike was precisely coordinated to create maximum disruption with minimum effort. Within 6 hours, the Virex defensive network that had held for nearly 150 years was collapsing. The human ships had identified weaknesses that neither side had noticed during decades of fighting. They exploited these weaknesses with surgical precision. Vrex Command, General Brown broadcast on all frequencies. This is General Lisa Brown, of the Earth Expeditionary Force. Your defensive positions have been neutralized. We are prepared to discuss terms for ending this conflict. The response came back filled with confusion and disbelief. Earth Force, this is General Klex of the Vrex Federation. How did you break our defenses so quickly? General Klex, we have been studying your conflict for several weeks. Your defensive strategy is excellent, but it was designed to counter Ketharan attack patterns. We used different patterns. Different how? We attacked your weak points instead of your strong points. We disrupted your coordination instead of trying to overpower your weapons. We fought the way your defenses were not designed to handle. The Vrex surrender came within 12 hours. A war that had lasted nearly 150 years ended in less than 1 day when human tactical thinking was applied to the problem. War Master Kethnar reviewed the battle records with growing amazement. General Brown, your forces achieved victory ratios that should be mathematically impossible. War Master, we have been preparing for every possible combat scenario for 800 years. This was not an unusual engagement for us. This was Tuesday. News of the Vrex victory spread throughout the galaxy within days. The Ketharan Empire's other enemies began to worry about what this new alliance meant for their own conflicts. The humans had demonstrated something that changed everything. Dr. Wilson, monitoring galactic communications from Earth, reported to Admiral Murphy. Admiral, we're intercepting communications from 17 different species. They're all asking the same question, which is, they want to know if Earth is interested in ending their wars too. Murphy looked at the galactic map showing dozens of ongoing conflicts. After 800 years of preparation, humanity finally had the war they had been training for. Not just one war, but all of them. Dr. Wilson, draft a response to all galactic powers. Tell them that Earth is now accepting requests for military consultation and conflict resolution services. What should we call ourselves, Admiral? Murphy smiled as she looked at the stars beyond Earth's atmosphere. For 800 years, humanity had been preparing for this moment. Now they were ready to bring their perfected art of warfare to the entire galaxy. Tell them we are the species that spent 800 years preparing for war. Tell them we are humanity, and the age of endless galactic conflicts is over. The galaxy would never be the same. Earth had awakened, and the universe was about to learn what 8 centuries of military evolution could accomplish.